Nancy Guthrie's home in Tucson, Arizona, with the very latest. Robert?
Kathy and Jonathan, the very latest would be that those investigators left this home and the property just about an hour and a half ago. While inside, there appeared to be camera flashes coming from inside of the home as well as inside of the garage. The house, as you said, belongs to Nancy Guthrie and her husband, but it has been empty for the last several days with only security guards parked out.
The desert behind the house does not look important at first. It looks like the kind of place people would never think twice about. A dry wash, scattered brush, loose dirt, and silence. But in a case already filled with confusion, that narrow stretch of land behind Nancy Guthrie's daughter's home has started drawing attention for a reason investigators still have not publicly explained. Over several weeks, separate people searching the area reported finding clothing there. Not once, multiple times. And because that wash sits behind the last family home Nancy visited before she vanished, every item found there carries a weight it might not have carried anywhere else.
Guthrie is now speaking out in a heartbreaking interview with her colleagues at NBC News about the disappearance of her mother, Nancy. It is the first time Savannah has spoken about the case at length in public. Take a look.
So there was no wander off, and the doors were propped open.
Yeah.
And there was blood on the front doorstep. And the Ring camera had been yanked off.
Yeah.
And so we were saying, this is...
Do something.
This is not okay. And he said, I think she's been kidnapped for ransom. And I said, what?
Yeah.
Well, why? What? And then I'm just said, do you think because of me? And he said, I'm sorry, sweetie, but yeah, maybe. But I knew that.
You did.
To think that I brought this to her bedside, that it's because of me. And I just say, I'm so sorry, Mommy. I'm so sorry.
Nancy Guthrie spent the evening of January 31st with family. She had dinner, visited, and by all public accounts, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. According to the known timeline, she arrived at her daughter Annie's home around 5:30 p.m. and stayed there for several hours. Later that night, around 9:45, she was driven back to her own house by her son-in-law. The garage door opened at about 9:48 and closed around 9:50. After that, the timeline narrows into a dark and troubling window. A few hours later, at 1:47 a.m., her doorbell camera disconnected. By 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker had lost its Bluetooth connection. Somewhere between those moments, something happened inside Nancy's house that ended with her gone. Blood on the porch, and no clear public explanation of how an 84-year-old woman could vanish so completely. That is what makes the desert wash behind Annie's home so hard to ignore. Not because clothing in a wash automatically means evidence. It doesn't. In southern Arizona, washes collect all kinds of debris. Wind carries things. Rain shifts sediment. Trash moves. Clothing can end up there for dozens of ordinary reasons. But this case has turned even ordinary things into possible clues. And when more than one item of women's clothing turns up in the same general area, behind the same property, during the same high-profile investigation, it becomes difficult not to ask whether anyone has fully ruled it in or ruled it out.
Time to rethink the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. From the start, a common assumption was that this was a relatively amateur operation. Premeditated, yes, but not that sophisticated. Well, now there's a major new focus as the search nears week number 6. The FBI is now looking at internet outages around the time the 84-year-old disappeared. The new development comes as FBI agents head back to Guthrie's Tucson neighborhood and canvass residents there door to door. They're asking if anyone's internet went out that morning, the morning that Guthrie vanished. If so, it could have disabled their surveillance cameras during that critical time period and prevent.
The first widely discussed discovery came on March 12th, about 40 days after Nancy disappeared. A pair of tan pants and a knee brace were reportedly found in the wash and shared online by an independent investigator who had been following the case. That immediately triggered speculation because Nancy had previously been photographed wearing tan pants. The resemblance was enough to fuel online discussion, but resemblance is not identification. That distinction matters. As of the public reporting reflected in the material you shared, there has been no confirmed statement that the pants belonged to Nancy, no publicly released DNA result, no official announcement tying the knee brace to her. And that uncertainty changes everything, because a visual match can start a theory, but it cannot finish one. There is also an important contradiction built into that first discovery. Savannah Guthrie later said her mother was taken in her pajamas, without shoes and without medication. If that description is accurate, then tan daytime pants would not match what Nancy was wearing at the time of the abduction. That does not automatically make the pants irrelevant.
Search for missing 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie is now nearing the 2-month mark. There are still no arrests and no clear answers. Her daughter, Savannah, speaking out for the first time about the turmoil she has experienced since her mother went missing and announcing she will be going back to work at the Today Show. Investigators say Nancy was likely abducted from her Arizona home despite tens of thousands of tips. The case appears to have stalled in recent weeks. The reward for information in the case has now surged past $1 million, with newly added funds hoping to generate fresh leads as the family continues to plead for her return.
They could have belonged to someone else. They could have come from some completely unrelated source. Or theoretically, they could have belonged to Nancy from an earlier point in the day. But without confirmation, the pants remain what they are right now. Suspicious enough to notice, but not proven enough to rely on. The second category of discovery is what makes the wash harder to dismiss. Also, on March 12th, another searcher reportedly found a woman's shirt in the same general desert zone. Online, it was described as possibly resembling sleepwear or night clothing. That description matters more than the tan pants, because if Nancy really was taken in pajamas, then a garment resembling sleepwear fits the known narrative more closely than a pair of outdoor pants ever could. Again, though, the same limitation applies. There has been no public confirmation that the shirt belonged to Nancy, no official forensic result, no statement linking it to the case. It may be meaningful, it may be random desert debris. Right now, publicly, it sits in that uncomfortable space between possibility and proof. Then came another reported discovery later in March. This time, images circulated of additional clothing items found in the same wash area, including what was described as a patterned light-colored garment that could have been sleepwear. That is the detail that sharpens the entire issue. A patterned light-colored garment found in the same stretch of desert behind the home Nancy visited that night feels different from random trash, not because it proves anything on its own, but because it echoes the description of the clothes Savannah said Nancy was wearing when she was taken. And once that kind of echo appears in a case like this, silence from authorities becomes louder.
She travels to her local family's home for dinner and playing games with the family, just visiting. At 9:48 p.m., which is very consistent to what we were told by the family, that Nancy was dropped off at home. And we know that because we have a garage door open at approximately, I can't stress that enough, at approximately 9:48 p.m. At 9:50 p.m., that garage door closes. Because that time we assume that Nancy's home and probably going to bed.
That silence is a major part of why these discoveries keep attracting attention. If the items were collected, examined, and ruled out, investigators may have good reasons for not commenting publicly. Law enforcement does not usually hold a press conference for every dead-end lead, but if the items were not promptly prioritized, then that raises a completely different concern, because this is not a routine missing persons case. This is one of the most heavily watched investigations in the country, involving an elderly woman allegedly abducted from her own home, with federal resources, massive public attention, and a reward that has climbed into the millions. In that kind of case, even items that may turn out to be nothing still deserve serious attention if they are found in a location this sensitive. The geography only adds to the tension. Nancy's home and Annie's home are not worlds apart. They're connected by a short drive, and the wash sits in terrain that could fit into movement between the two areas.
Distinct blood spatter patterns in that one photograph he shows us. There's a medium velocity, there are drops, and then one of the most significant things to me is there's a transfer print. And a transfer print, Laura, means something that already has blood on it touches something else and leaves that print. It looks to me like perhaps, I'll just say it was Nancy, had blood on her hands, and maybe right here, 2 of her fingers pressed down, and maybe one part of her palm. That's what it looks like to me.
That does not prove a route, does not prove transport, does not prove that anything was discarded there deliberately. But it does mean the location is not random in the abstract. It is connected to the last confirmed family visit Nancy had before she disappeared. And in a case where investigators believe she was taken from her home, location matters almost as much as the objects themselves. At the same time, any careful script has to say what cannot be overstated. The family has publicly been described as cooperative, and law enforcement has said they were cleared early in the case. Searches involving family property were described as consent searches, not probable cause raids. Public commentary from credible voices has leaned away from the idea of family involvement and toward an outside suspect, especially given the masked figure seen on the recovered doorbell images. So the existence of clothing in a wash behind Annie's home does not, by itself, reverse any of that. It does not erase the public statements that have already been made, and it certainly does not prove wrongdoing by anyone in the family. What it does do is create one more unanswered question in a case already defined by unanswered questions. Why does that wash keep producing clothing? Were those items tested? Were they collected? Were they ruled out? If they were irrelevant, why has no one publicly put that issue to rest?
This family has cooperated 100%. 100% everything we've asked for them. Everything. Their cars, their phones, their computers, their statements. They are victims.
I can also report that it has been confirmed this morning, and I'm sure we all assume this, that every family member passed polygraphs with flying colors.
And if they were not irrelevant, why has the public heard nothing? Those are very different possibilities, but both lead to the same place: uncertainty. That is what makes this case so haunting. Not simply that Nancy Guthrie is still missing, though that alone is devastating. It is that nearly every new detail seems to open another gap instead of closing one. A masked figure at the door, blood on the porch, no footprints, a vehicle held for weeks, clothing in a wash. Every fact points somewhere, but not clearly enough. And so the desert behind the house becomes one more symbol of the larger mystery, a place where things surface, but answers do not.